Hey everybody, how you doing today? Seth Williams here. My co-host Jaren Barnes is here.
What's up, guys?
As you've probably noticed, Jaren joined the team being mainly just me, back in early July, and it's been really fun working with him. It's been just awesome to get his perspective on things, brainstorm about the future of REtipster.com, where this blog is going to go, what we can do for the community, just how we can kind of grow the brand and just offer more value to the world of real estate investors. And what I wanted to do in this particular conversation is just have a conversation with Jaren and myself, where we talk a little bit more about Jaren's background. So if you don't know anything about him at this point, you can learn about that right now. And we'll also talk about what REtipster has been in the past, like the origins of this website, the way that I've always approached things, and kind of where we think it's going to go in the future, like what our plan is, the things that we're excited about, things that we think you guys are going to be excited about. So we're just going to have a casual conversation here. We'll see what comes out of it.
Yeah, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, and for those of you who haven't heard it, Jaren has actually been on the podcast before, episode number 10, retipster.com/10, if you want to hear like version 1 of his story.
Really more like how REtipster changed my entire financial perspective for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it was a very cool story. I definitely check that out if you haven't. But Jaren, for those who don't want to go listen to that or don't have time to, maybe you can just give us like your backstory. What was your background? I mean, how did you get into real estate? Help people understand who Jaren Barnes is. Yeah,
man. Well, a long time ago, a man met a woman. Just kidding. No. So I have a very, very diverse background. I grew up in kind of split down the middle, 50-50 between the San Francisco Bay Area and a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. And at the time, my dad was actually married to a Puerto Rican woman. And so growing up in Georgia, I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household where there were 9 people, and me and my dad were the only white people. So growing up, there was I had Mami Ketty and Abuelo, and they lived downstairs. We converted the basement into a second unit, and they didn't even speak English properly. So like I don't speak Spanish, but
oh, you don't speak Spanish? Okay,
I don't, but I understand it quite a bit. So like because I grew up around it. So I have a very, very diverse background for sure. Getting into real estate, kind of my first real pursuit in life was in ministry. I was pretty radical in my faith as a teenager, and wanted to just live my life doing crazy stuff for God, to the point where like I dropped out of my freshman year of college. I went to Lee University for a year, and then I pursued kind of a volunteer, quote unquote, live by faith, where I was really living off of my college fund, and was just just kind of a superintendent over a homeless shelter. So I was a men's transition center in Great Bend, Kansas, in the middle of nowhere, and I was connected with a friend that I met online named Pete Cabrera Jr., and I was overseeing his brother-in-law's homeless shelter. And there were like 5 guys that I oversaw at 19 years old, which is crazy. And then from there, I ended up going on a mission trip to England, and I met my wife. And I kind of had this crazy situation where I knew she was my wife when I first saw her, and like it was like this really crazy story. But once, 2 months later, I married. I've never really held down a job except working part-time at Wendy's. I'm like, it might be a good idea to actually get a career, right? So I moved back to my mom's house in California, and I just tried to figure it out. So I had some friends there that I was really close with, and they were getting into business. That kind of had the entrepreneurial bug bite me, right? And I read a book by Brendan Bouchard about marketing. That was my first business book I ever read. And I'm like, okay, well, I know that business is the route I want to go. And so I tried to do a bunch of stuff that did not work. I tried to start a medical book publishing company with a friend that was a medical doctor. I tried to do a bunch of crazy stuff. And I just was on this journey for probably the first 2 years of my marriage, just trying to figure out very, very quickly what I could do as a career. I ended up getting into insurance, and I had to hustle my way to convince them to hire me because they only wanted to hire college graduates. So I got my license, and I like called all these places up. I'm like, you want to hire me because of this, this, and this. So I finally landed a job, and they love me. I'm like one of the top performers there. And then my friends say, hey, we just bought into this education course through Fortune Builders. And it was they are, for those of you who don't know, they're kind of they're not to knock them or whatever, but they're definitely in the guru camp of sorts, right? So my friends dropped $20,000 between the two of them to learn this education course on how to flip houses in the Bay Area. And they're like, we want you on board and da-da-da. And I'm like, hey, if I'm going to do this, you guys have to understand I'm married, so this has to be serious. And then they had 2 business meetings that they showed up late to. And I'm like, dude, I'm out. I'm sorry. I can't do this. But then a couple months, like about a month or 2 later, they connected with a established fix and flipper in the Bay Area and convinced me to quit my job and join them full time. So I went from a salaried job in insurance to door knocking pre-foreclosures with absolutely no real guarantee for the future. It was a very
wise
dumb
career move.
Yeah, it was a dumb move, but it was a lot of fun. And the bad thing was, unfortunately, the established fix and flipper that we worked with, he was really unethical. I didn't know it at the time, but now I'm licensed, and I mean, his primary strategy was to get a property in a foreclosure process and then manipulate the BPO by sneaking into the property and destroying it.
Seriously? Holy cow!
Like,
That's horrible. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was like his.
That sounds like a jail-worthy offense. I mean, that's.
Oh yeah, oh no, it's completely illegal. Like, and they would party all the time, and we our core group were like a bunch of Christians, right? So we were like, we're Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar, like we were trying to justify it that we're like, but I mean, the guy would, force us to go out drinking with him. And I mean, not force us, but like if we wanted to have any kind of relational capital with him at all, we'd have to go to the bars. And so long story short, I was the #1 producer there. I got 10 properties in less than 6 months under contract for short sale, just straight up from door knocking. We had the most complicated door knocking system I've ever seen. Like, we had this algorithm. We had a macro Excel algorithm that would pull the list from the title companies and the trustees, I guess is what they're called in California. And we had this data where we could say, okay, these properties are most likely going to produce a sale because they have the highest level of motivation. And so it's a super crazy, complicated system. Long story short, I got tired of all the craziness. I never got paid, and they kept delaying the stuff that I was working on because the main agent who processed the short sales really didn't get much of a commission through my stuff. I got the majority of the commission, or some reason. I don't know exactly why, but they didn't put priority on my stuff. So 10 months into it, I'm like, guys, I'm out. Ended up losing one of my best friends through the process. It was really, really hard. But I started a blog called Real Estate Catalyst at the time, and I did a review on Bigger Pockets. And I somehow got the attention of Brandon and Josh, and Brandon reached out to me or left a comment saying, "Hey, thanks so much for the review." Da 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 da. And then I found out through the grapevine that they were trying to they were going to the Bay Area to do a presentation for Google. And I was like, hey, well, I reached out to Brandon. I'm like, can I connect you to the main guy that does the Bigger Pockets related meetups, right? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I connected them. They did a meetup where Josh and Brandon were there. And then I found out about a week later, I just saw online that they were looking to hire somebody. And so I reached out to Josh and I said, hey man, like, tell me a little bit about this situation. I applied for the thing, I'm really interested, but Josh really made it clear that they want to grow locally in Colorado. Like, so they were not looking for another remote employee. Like, only Brandon had that luxury because he's Brandon, right? So we went into the agreement because they really needed some help, understanding that it was going to be temporary. So I worked there for 5 years. I worked there for 5 months, and it was awesome. I learned a ton of stuff about blogging, about real estate, about everything, because I was doing everything under the sun. My name was support admin, but like that was just because it was an umbrella of whatever we need Jaren to do, he's going to do. So I mean, I think that's how I first got exposed to Seth at REtipster, and because I was the blog editor, the blog coordinator, the podcast coordinator. I did a lot of stuff. And after that, I'm like, after my 5 months was up and it was time for me to move on, I was like, okay, well, I have experience in blogging and I have experience in real estate. How am I going to merge the two? They're two completely different industries. There's normally not a lot that kind of merge. Long story short, I ended up moving to Indiana because me and my wife wanted to be able to afford a house. And there was an inheritance, a house that was an inheritance to my mom that she was looking to sell. And she decided to graciously split it between me and my sister. So we ended up moving to Indianapolis. And I was kind of just faced with this decision of like, okay, am I going to go down the real estate path or am I going to go down the blogging path? So I decided to get my real estate license. And then I met Brett Snodgrass, long story short, who's the owner of Simple Wholesaling, and he hired me to do blogging stuff. So I went, it's just kind of weird how my life has always been this crossroads between blogging and content marketing and real estate. Started working for Simple Wholesaling, and I don't know. It was an awesome fit. Me and Brett started a podcast. I loved what I was doing. I loved the company, but there was something that was interesting about Simple Wholesaling is that there was always kind of two different pulls, and there was kind of always two different directions that we were being pulled in. There was, on one hand, we wanted to be influencers and make an impact and make a difference through our content, and then also simultaneously have the wholesaling business. So what always kind of happened is whenever we'd start building traction in the blog area, Brett would be like, we can't do that. We got to go in the direction of building the wholesaling business. So long story short, kind of halfway through my time at Simple Wholesaling, I jumped from the content stuff into the deal side of the business. And when I did that, we really kind of took off. Like when I first started working there, Brett was doing about probably 8 to 12 deals a month. And by the time I left, we were averaging 30 to 35 properties a month. And the way we wholesaled was a little bit different. Most of the time, people think of wholesaling as assigning contracts, but we actually would buy the property, close on it, then market it for sale and sell it, just because it was cleaner and gave us a lot more control of the inventory. From there, we built the podcast, we built a Facebook following, a blog, all that from the ground up, and really grew and kind of scaled Simple Wholesaling. And when I departed ways from there, I was in a mastermind group with Seth, and going back a little bit, when I was at Simple Wholesaling, I wanted to start investing myself, but didn't want to be in any direct competition to Brett. But what I knew the best was wholesaling, right? So I looked for a way for me to take the skills that I knew as a wholesaler and apply them to real estate in a way that wasn't a direct competition to Brett. And we had Seth on the podcast and a couple of other guys in the land space. And so I, decided to reach out to Seth and just ask him some questions about the land business. And he graciously let me, in exchange for auditing and giving kind of feedback on his course, access to the course for free. And I took it, and it completely changed my life within, I think 2 months or something. And you can go hear the full story over at episode 10. But I mean, I made like 40 grand in one deal, and just it was unreal. It still feels like a dream. So So from there, I started my own land business, and then it was kind of, once I transitioned out of simple wholesaling, the only reason why I left simple wholesaling was Brett had a change of direction. Like he wanted to he was moving to Fort Wayne, and we left on good terms. We're still really good friends, but he just had a different change of direction. Great friends. We're still on good terms, but, it just didn't work. So I branched out to try and pursue real estate on my own. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm just, my life always has to be in this content marketing and real estate bubble. But when I was just doing real estate, things weren't working. And just no matter what I was doing, like the business stuff stopped working as well. And I don't know, it was weird. But then Seth, he saw me struggling, and I was like every week in the mastermind for like a month, like, guys, my life sucks. I hate everything. Everything sucks. I don't know what I'm doing. And I think he felt bad for me. So he was like, hey man, like, let me see if there's an opportunity for us to work together. And there was. And what's crazy is now that I'm back in the content marketing real estate bubble, my land business is now starting to work again and start taking off, and we're selling properties. So I don't know, man, but that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
No, that's a great story, man. Something that strikes me about just hearing your experience and what you've been through is, like, I admire the way that like, you don't sit still. Like, if you're in a situation where you're not really happy, or it's just kind of a slog, like it's not fun, you're not really living your best life type thing, like, you get out of it and you move. Even if that means like taking risks and doing things that are scary. I think the downside of that is, like, there's risk, like you can kind of screw things up, and sometimes it doesn't turn out right. But I don't know, it's I'm sort of the opposite, where, like, I will, not happily, but I will live with monotony and doing things I don't like for a long time, if that means being very safe when I finally make a transition. And, that's why I was working in the same job for 10 years. Not that it was a terrible job, but it wasn't really my dream. Whereas I think if you were in my situation, you would have just like bounced around to one thing after another until you found the thing that was best for you in that moment. So,
yeah, as a husband though, I would rather have the issue of being stuck because I really dragged my wife through the mud in a lot of ways. Like, it's good now because I finally hit some things that are working, but for a long time it was like she was not happy.
Yeah, is she out of curiosity, is she the type who like really wants consistency and comfort and certainty and that kind of thing, or is she more like adventurous, like, yeah, let's go try something new? Like, what is she like?
I think, and this is going to be a generalization, but I think in general, women have a tendency to want to be more stable, more consistent. But in that context, if there was a spectrum, I would say my wife is more on the adventurous spectrum. So she's adventurous and she's open to new experiences, but when there's not money coming in and things aren't consistent, and her husband, like, literally day to day is like changing what he's going to do with his life, it definitely does not go over too well. Well,
yeah, again, generalization, I don't think you can say anything consistent about any, group of people, but my wife is that way too, just in terms of wanting consistency and certainty and that kind of thing. Probably more so even than your wife. So it's frankly a miracle that I've, been able to do the stuff I've been able to do, because, when you're doing any kind of entrepreneurial endeavor, like, uncertainty is just part of the package. Like, you just have to tolerate that on some level. So yeah. Luckily it's worked out so far. But, well, cool. Jaren, I appreciate you sharing your story, man. That's really good to hear. I didn't even know all those details. So I think only like part of that came out when we talked back in episode 10. So, so I guess, transitioning a little bit. So I sort of see Jaren coming on board here as sort of a turning point in some ways, because, like, for really as long as REtipster has existed, like, it's just been me for the most part, just sort of dreaming up ideas and, going day to day thinking of, well, what do people want to hear about today? And then just writing or making videos about that. And, it has not failed. It's gotten me somewhere, but, man, there's something to be said for, two heads are better than one. Like, it's so helpful to have a sounding board and somebody who, like really has like real estate investing experience, land investing experience, blogging experience, like a lot of things Jaren and I have in common. Like he's got a lot of relevant skills that I think this website needs to go to the next level. All I really know to do is to write and make videos and podcasts about the stuff that I know the most about, which is the land investing business and rental properties and, you know, marketing, direct mail, a lot of theoretical stuff that I've spent a lot of time reading and studying. And that's been great. And that's certainly produced lots of free, helpful content for lots of people. But I think like as we look to the future, I don't think we have anything set in stone yet. It's not like we know exactly where we're going, but, you know, I know Jaren has different projects he's working on. I have different projects I'm working on. I have different things that I've been, you know, interested in for years. And I feel like I finally have a chance to explore some of those things. And, you know, I know we sort of sat down and we came up with a list of like, what are the different like real estate investing niches that we would become experts in if we had the time to do that? And like, what is it exactly that we want out of real estate? Because when you just talk about real estate investing, like there is all kinds of stuff, like all kinds of different avenues you could go down. You could talk about house flipping. You could talk about landlording. You could talk about, I mean, you name it. If it has to do with real estate, like it's fair game. But I know something that I get really excited about is the idea of like passive income that is truly passive. And it's one of those buzzwords you hear a lot in a lot of different businesses. And I think the truth is like true passive income is pretty hard to come by. And it's not like an idiot proof thing. Like some people talk about rental properties like it's a passive income thing. And it's, I don't know. I think you can get pretty close to that if you've got a really solid property manager. But, you know, the act of finding the deal, of closing on the deal, of paying attention to maintenance issues, you know, policing your property management company if you have one, like that stuff is not passive. Like it does require some input from you. And when you talk about things like house flipping, I mean, that is the opposite of passive. That's like the most active kind of income you can make. Yeah. And the land business, I mean, if you're actively pursuing deals, I don't see how that's passive in any way. I mean, it takes real work to do the direct mail, to talk to people, to close deals, to market them, to sell them. And I think when you start getting into seller financing, there's certainly an element of passive income that comes into the picture, assuming people continue to pay you, which many times does not necessarily happen. And of course, those streams of passive income eventually stop when people pay off. So, I mean, there's definitely an element of passivity, if that's a word, to that. But it's not like truly 100% passive income. And I want to get to the real passive stuff.
Yeah,
where you buy it and you're sort of done. I mean, there might be a little bit of stuff you have to pay attention to, but by and large, like the value of the asset is going to continue to generate the income, whether you do anything or not. So, I know Jaren and I sort of came up with a list of things that we felt were close enough to that to kind of make us satisfied. Because would you agree, Jaren? Is that kind of what you're interested in too? Is the passive income type stuff, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So for me, I think real estate is a means to an end. Like I think real estate exists to help people get what they want out of life.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and that can mean that if your dream for your life is to be a business owner, you can own a real estate based business. But for me, it's more about how can I make enough money where I don't have to worry about it anymore so that I can go do the stuff that I want to worry about, you know? So because of that, it's real estate to me is about lifestyle. It's about, okay, how can I set up these systems or these financial structures to where I'm making, you know, $10,000 to $15,000 a month to where I don't have to worry about it anymore. And I'm good. Whether I wake up at a beach or I wake up and, you know, God forbid I had a loved one die, there's just this buffer between me and life where my income is secure, so I'm free to do whatever I've been put on this earth to do. And so to that end, like I don't know if there is a 100% passive, truly 100% passive method of real estate, or anything for that matter, outside of maybe buying a stock or maybe buying a REIT. But there are some things that you can get really close through. Take storage units, for example. Once you buy a storage unit and you have a team in place, if you have a manager in place, you just talk to them maybe once a month, if that, maybe once every quarter. Just keep a thumb on making sure everything's performing well and you're sticking to your business plan. Another one would be like triple net, right? Like if I go buy the building that Target is my tenant and they're leasing it from me for 30 years, with a triple net, they take care of the maintenance. They take care of, the CapEx or the big, huge expenses. They're there for the long haul. And I mean, those are like 30, 40, 50-year leases sometimes, and they're expensive to buy those buildings. And the big risk is once the tenant moves out, filling it up again with a big tenant like a Target or a Walmart or whatever. But once that thing's set up, you just get a massive check every month, and that's awesome.
I think the key to that is the location, ultimately. I mean, if you got the right location, like tons of people will line up to go there. But of course, as you said, I mean, to get the right location, it's not gonna come cheap. Like you need some kind of financial resources to get there, or other people's money or something. And I think, I mean, in my mind, that's where land investing plays a big role, just because it's like the cash machine that can generate those funds. But that's not really like the end game.
Man, land is the best real estate business model out there. Like in the forums, like in the Facebook group and all of that, people throw out numbers like, yeah, I don't touch anything unless I'm making like a 700% return. And like, they don't even blink an eye. Like, and I mean, this is the only area where you can buy a piece of land for, like, I have a property right now I bought for $267, and it's listed right now for $25,000. Now, even if at the end of the day, I only sell it for $8,500, I bought it for $267. In terms of ROI, holy crap, man. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I know. And it's, I've honestly, I've never really been able to succeed at anything but land. Like I've tried plenty of other, well, I guess I take that back. I mean, I've got rental properties, but that's not like, the rental properties were sort of the stage two. Like once I had the cash from the land, that's when I bought the rental properties. And I frankly wouldn't have been able to if it weren't for land. Like land has sort of been the gateway that allows me to do so many other things. And I think, the same, not that land has to be the only source of generating the cash, but certainly a very powerful and kind of no-brainer way to do it. I mean, when you see how much more effective it is compared to all the other stuff that's out there and how much harder so many other things are and slower. I mean, land is, I think land will always sort of be a core component of the stuff we talk about because we both do it. And that's a really, really significant way to generate the cash you need so that you can do these bigger projects.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a blog post right now about wholesaling because that was my background, right? So I want to, give the best that I can for the audience on the information the knowledge that I have from the industry or whatever. But at the very end, I'm going to absolutely say, like, wholesaling is a really great business model, but it's number two. It's not number one. Number one is land. And if you want to learn more about land, you need to check out the REtipster Club because, honestly, your course changed my life, man. And the fact that land exists, it's just, I can't say more about it. It's just ridiculous. So and it's really funny because, I'm a vegan, urban, dude from the Bay Area, and I'm investing in this rural land in the middle of Southern Indiana, talking to good old boys that have, camo jackets on and talk about hunting. And when I show properties and they're talking to me about, yeah, I just killed this deer and I'm like, yeah, you killed that deer, because it's hilarious. I should not be in this industry at all, but the opportunity is just too great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's especially if you're taking phone calls and, which, eventually you have to do it at some point. You can't just not do it, but you'll talk to all kinds of interesting people in the land business. Some nice, some not so nice, some normal, some crazy people.
Yeah.
Cool thing about land is, like, it's sort of this common thing that, like, all real estate has to do with. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you can't, I mean, it is the foundation for every piece of real estate out there. So that's why, you know, something that I personally have been working on quite a bit over the past, really since Jaren started, is researching farmland. That's kind of a thing, an area that I want to get into. I've been fascinated by it for a long time. And I mean, in my mind, that's an example of something that is as close to 100% passive as possible. When you own the farmland and you lease it out to a farmer, they do all the work, they bear all the risk, they're just paying you their annual lease payment, and you just collect that. A similar thing I'm finding with farmland, though, is that, I mean, the trick is in finding the deal. Like, if you can find a very good piece of, or even like a halfway good piece of farmland, if you're only looking at stuff that's like publicly listed by a farmland broker, so far, I've not found anything even remotely close to what I would call a good deal. I mean, I think you sort of have to understand how to seek out those motivated sellers, probably through direct mail. And even then, I think you're probably going to end up paying a little bit more than a residential lot, because most parcels of farmland are, like, if they're actually being farmed right now, that means they're generating income, which means the seller is not just going to, like, part with it for nothing, like a residential lot that is just costing them money. So that's kind of the thing I'm trying to wade through right now. I'm sure there's an answer, but I haven't quite gotten to the bottom of it yet. And I know, Jaren, you've been researching more the world of self-storage facilities, and you know, I think one of the avenues you can go down with that is, you know, buying an existing one. But another way you can go is to build a self-storage facility or some kind of, you know, a number of units on a parcel of vacant land. So we're both sort of exploring things that start with land as the foundation, but then how do you actually get like a long-term buy and hold parcel of land that generates income? So you're not like flipping it, you're just buying it to keep it for the cash flow potential.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I'm on the fence on what to do with storage units. I'm going to probably eventually bring my friend Tyler on the podcast to pick his brain, because I have a friend right now. What he did is he bought he put a bid in. It's still going through the due diligence process, and anything, you never celebrate till the fat lady sings in real estate. But you know, his strategy is he identified an existing commercially zoned like pool barn that has like a bunch of asphalt already laid, already has an existing structure. And right now, if he can get it over 6 months, he might be able to convert the pool barn to like 50 storage units. And then in the future, add on, because he has the asphalt is, the area is huge. So there's already a foundation there where he's able to save a lot of costs. So I might look at converting an existing structure. I might look at building from the ground up, but I know eventually, and I'm saying it right here on the podcast so that it's out there and it'll keep me accountable. At the end of my pursuit, I will actually successfully buy one. And I will take you guys through the entire process of what I learned and how I did. I'm going to be coming out with blog posts about it and all of that in the near future. So be on the lookout for that.
That's pretty exciting. Yeah, man. I can't wait to see what you learn and what comes out of that, because I mean that's another. I would just as well love to be researching that stuff myself, because I just think there's so much potential in that particular type of real estate. And I know when I was working in commercial banking, I financed a handful of self-storage facilities for different people. And all the ones that I was involved with was basically an existing facility that somebody was buying or refinancing. So I haven't done a lot of, you know, where people buy land and then build one from scratch. But I think, I think the benefit to buying an existing one is that you have a lot more information. Like, you know how much revenue it's generating, you know what the demand is in that area. If it's dilapidated and if it's like a tired old facility, you can sort of assess what it's going to cost to bring it up to the present day standards. Whereas when you buy a piece of land and just plan to build something on it, you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit. Like, I'm sure there's ways to figure out what the demand is, But still, like, when you build it, you have a completely empty facility, and you got to find tenants, and you got to keep it pretty darn occupied. Like the numbers I always heard were like 80% or more occupancy in order to cash flow the debt on it and that kind of thing. So I don't know. It's a much more, with farmland and with self-storage stuff, it's definitely a few steps more complicated than just flipping land. So there's a lot more learning that goes on. And if you're going to buy it and hold it, like there's a lot more moving pieces that matter, and you can't just wing it, because it's not like you're paying, at least the deals we've been looking at, we're not paying like pennies on the dollar for it. You're paying a little bit more, and I don't know, there's more risk involved. So
sometimes you're straight up paying over market value, over asking price for these storage units, because where you're adding value is where you're making your money is like, okay, if I have an existing structure, can I add another 50 to 100 units on this structure? Like, can I do things where, I can make it where the seller wants to actually sell to me and still make this work as an investment. So it's a totally different mindset than working with motivated sellers.
Yeah, and I know with the self-storage properties that I was looking at in banking, like one of the big value adds that they were doing was, like, one example that comes to mind was they were buying a facility where half of it was being used for like RV storage, like a big enclosed building where the people could just park their RVs. And they were like, well, that's dumb, because you can make a lot more per square foot if you convert all of that to like smaller personal units where you can not store RVs, but just, rent out a lot more spaces to people to just store stuff. And so that was one of the reasons why they were willing to pay a lot more for the property, because they realized once they made this conversion, their income would go up a lot. So I think it's sort of like similar to a lot of other investing niches, like house flipping, for example, where, like, if you can have the foresight and see the opportunity where other people just don't get it, there's a lot to be said for that. So that's kind of the direction we're looking to go. Not just limited to self-storage and farmland, but the idea of pursuing things that are much more passive in nature. Yeah. And again, not necessarily 100% passive. There's other stuff that goes into it, but we're sort of steering away from the active investing, like the house flipping stuff. Like, we're not really interested in that, working 80 hours a week and taking huge risks.
Yeah, and wholesaling specifically. Like, I'm working on a blog series right now where I'm going to share with everyone in our community everything that I know and the kitchen sink about real estate wholesaling, so that I never have to talk about it again. I think it's a great strategy. I think that it's a good opportunity, but it's just not my life's passion is not to own a real estate business. If that's your life's passion, I think I met people that they wake up in the morning and they just love real estate. They just love the deal. They love the chase. They love the crazy work hours, the hustle and bustle. They love it all. And that's awesome. But that's not me. And I don't think that that's Seth. So if we're going to be authentic to you guys and be able to provide really good value moving forward, we have to kind of share a common interest of like, okay, well, if the end game is not just to make money, but to have a life that looks like X, how can we help you guys reach that life through real estate investing? And a lot of these more passive income types of investing, they require a lot more capital. So I know a lot of the stuff that we're going to be touching on is like, how do you find that capital? How do you raise that capital? How do you do syndications? What does that even look like? And kind of, because a lot of those big words, they scare me, and I know they scare a lot of people.
Yeah,
I'm terrified of that stuff. Yeah. So if Seth and me can figure out how to make it easy and accessible for you guys, then that's really what we want to do, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I've always thought real estate is a means to an end. I don't invest in land because I just have this passion for dirt. Like, I just love rolling around in my own pieces of vacant farmland. That's not the idea. Like, it's just the path of least resistance to generating large influxes of cash, or streams of income in the case of seller financing. And it's just way easier than anything else I've tried. And that's why I do land. But yeah, it's not because I love talking to strangers on the phone all day or anything like that. And the funny thing is, like, I actually know people who do love that stuff. Like, it may be in their best interest to do something that's more active. Like maybe, this pursuit of the passive thing isn't necessarily the best fit for them. But for me, being an introvert, somebody who doesn't just like love yakking with people all day, like I want predictability. I want, not trouble-free cash flow, but as trouble-free as possible. Awesome. Like just with, and that's another thing that's always kind of bothered me about my rental properties, my duplexes that I own, is that they're, and if you own rentals, I'm sure you understand this too, where like I could have smooth sailing for like 11 months out of the year. Like the money's coming in, the tenants are paying, everything's going great. All of a sudden I got to replace a roof and all the money I just made all year is gone. So it's like, what was this whole year for? Like if I can't really depend on the money, then what is the point of this? Like this is just so frustrating to me. And again, when you're looking at things like farmland, like that's not so much as big of a thing. Like I guess it could be depending on how you structure leases and any wells and improvements and irrigation on the property. But the way that I would be structuring all that stuff is that as much uncertainty and as much of the question marks as possible are on the shoulders of the farmer, not my shoulders as the landowner. And I think with self-storage units, like you can't get away from that. There's definitely things you have to, CapEx costs and that kind of thing, but it's less, like you have roofs, you have doors, you have pavement, maybe a gate or something like that. But
and it's much more predictable. With a storage unit, like, okay, based off the condition of the roof, I'm going to have to replace this at this point. Like you can really structure your things in just a much more approachable way. It's just more streamlined. Whereas with tenants, because people are random and they have all these variables in the equation of like, I'm mad today, so I'm going to pour concrete down the drain, that kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about that necessarily as much with storage units.
That's not to say that rental properties are not a viable business. They totally are, and people make it work all day long. But I'm not a huge fan of the lack of predictability behind that. So, I think I'll probably, like, I have no plans to sell my duplexes. It's not like I hate them, but it's just like, it's in my mind less desirable than things that are more predictable. So if there is a more predictable route to explore, I'm definitely going to explore that.
Yeah, and I think in terms of content, like, I don't know about you, Seth, but I know for me, like, I really want to see the REtipster Club grow beyond just the land business. Like, I want the REtipster Club to be something that when people join, it's almost like a database of real estate knowledge in the areas that we specialize in that other people frankly don't really touch on. Like, how cool would it be to have a course on how to do a syndication or like how to buy property through owner financing, or like, and that was actually just as detailed and, actionable, for lack of a better word, as our current land course. How cool would it be to hear the testimonies and the stories of, like me, where I was like, man, my life got changed by this land course, and we were able to go just beyond land and help others take the money they're making from their land business and then walk them through the process of like, here's how you buy a storage unit, or here's how you do this. Here's how you get, funding for your farmland that you're getting, It'd be awesome.
Yeah. I sort of see the land business as like, in a lot of ways, it's real estate investing 101, because a lot of the complexities are not there. Like, they just don't really exist. But once you do start getting to step 2 and step 3, well, now there's a lot more stuff you have to figure out how to deal with. Whether it's, note investing or, triple net leases or, whatever.
Even being a private lender.
Or being a private lender. Any of that stuff that's more passive in nature, that would sort of be like the next step beyond land once you have actually figured out how to, build a cash generating machine, which is, it's it's undeniably more active in nature. It's not something you can just not spend time on and make tons of money on, at least not in the beginning. But, once you have the cash and you want to start exploring those other avenues to kind of solidify your income for life in a way that's more predictable and not a huge hassle day in and day out, how do you do that? What are the options and how do you go about exploring those? So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely where I want the future of the blog to go and of the membership site, like I just said. Currently, REtipster Club is it's the land business. That is why people sign up and why people go there. And I think it's the best thing out there, but, I think there's a lot more we can bring to the table in terms of what comes next, what's after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess that sort of covers all the main things we want to talk about. It kind of gives you an introduction to Jaren, kind of gives you some context for where the REtipster blog has been and where we're looking to steer the ship in the future. Again, we don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of how this is going to materialize and come to fruition, but that kind of gives you an idea of what we're most interested in and where we think we can bring the most value to the table for all of you guys listening and reading and watching. So,
real quick before we finish up, man, I just want to say, guys, I am super grateful to be here. And I just want you guys to know that from just being real, I'm going to do my best to figure out all the hard stuff so that you don't have to. And I know that that's Seth's DNA, and I know that that's the DNA of REtipster, but we really want to take our connection with you guys to the next level. And I want to know, I want you guys to know that I don't take it for granted that I'm here. And I believe that I have a mission here to serve you guys. So if there's any way that I can be a resource to you, if there's any feedback that you have on how we could do things better, or if there's something that's missing from the REtipster community that would be really helpful, reach out to me. My email is jaren@retipster.com. I'm not able to answer and respond to everybody that emails me, but as much as I'm able, I really want to be available for you guys. So just wanted to share my heart there before we finish up.
Yeah, and that's actually a great just sidebar. To anybody out there who's listening to this, if you ever want to work for me or for anybody who's like me or anybody who's has some kind of a existing business that they're passionate about, that's one of the things that made it a no-brainer for me to hire somebody like Jaren, is the fact that he literally cares about this website and this REtipster thing, on the same level that I do. And he's an employee. He doesn't own this business. I'm just paying him. And, 99% of employees out there aren't really like that. They're there to just put in their hours, get their paycheck, and go home, and basically, deliver just what they need to not get fired, basically. Maybe that's a overgeneralization. So maybe that's not totally true, but, most people are not that on fire. But Jaren is, and he really cares about this stuff, and he's got a lot of just relevant experience that I think is gonna make a huge difference to the people who are consuming this content. And Jaren's a great example to me, just in terms of his passion and the fire that he has for the things he works on. I just find that super inspiring to see that, because I've seen a lot of life so far, and I've seen enough to know that that's a rare quality to come across. So if you're ever trying to get on the radar of somebody that you, look up to or anything like that, Jaren is just a great example to follow in terms of the value he brings to the table. So I'll just wanted to insert that little comment. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, for me, man, it's just, I have one life that I'm given, and I don't want to give my time to things that I don't actually believe in. Right. So to me, I know that from a tax perspective or whatever, from a practical, who calls the shots perspective, right? I'm an employee, but the few times where I've actually been a real employee, I worked security for a little bit. I worked part-time at Wendy's for a little bit. I didn't last. I got fired because I can't do it. I have to, and maybe it's because I'm a millennial or whatever, but I actually have to have a mission behind what I do in order for me to thrive. And so for me to be, at Bigger Pockets, that was like, they were my mission. At Simple Wholesaling, that was my mission. And now that I'm here at REtipster, and it's funny because at each stage, like if I could have done nothing else for the rest of my life, I totally would have, but it just, life didn't end up happening that way. But for, the season that I'm here at REtipster, like this is my mission, is to serve our audience and to actually, like, I know a core value of our brand is life-changing content. Like I want our goal with everything that we put out is to have somebody read that or watch that video and be like, dang, that just changed my life. Yeah. We don't reach that every single time, but we strive for that, And I just think it's super important it's just really important to who I am. And that's why I'll work crazy hours and I'll put it all in, because to me, it's not work. It's like, this is my mission, I'm the Blues Brothers, like I'm on a mission from God,
Yeah. I always found it really cool how, like, I can put a ton of time into a blog post or a video or a podcast episode like this. And like, it's worth me putting many, many hours into that, because when it's done, like, it will continue to serve people for years into the future while I'm sleeping, So it's like, it's totally worth the effort to like make something remarkable, because if you just have a blog or a podcast feed or YouTube channel full of junk that doesn't really make a difference to anybody, it's like, what is the point of that? That's just depressing to even think about. So yeah, man, I'm glad you share the passion and the vision. And I think everybody's going to have a lot to gain from having you in the mix here.
Yeah, man.
Well, I appreciate you, dear listener. Thanks for sticking with us. Hope you are as excited as we are about where things are going. And if you guys want to see the show notes for this particular episode, check out retipster.com/24. That's where you can find all the details, the video of us talking here. It's just riveting, amazing to watch our heads just bobbing back and forth.
Especially my white background.
Yeah. But yeah, hope you guys check that out as well. And thanks again for listening. And we will talk to you again in the next episode.